Know that there are major changes in student loan rules that went into effect at the beginning of this year in 2026. Today on the Real Life Planning Podcast, I'm talking with Kathleen Boyd, a student loan expert and certified financial planner. She's going to break it down for us and tell us everything that we need to know. Go, Kathleen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Cynthia.
So, Bill, what's important to know about you?
So, what's important to know about me is I'm a student loan consultant. I work for a company, my own company. I'm the founder of Student Loan Savvy, where I do one on one consultations around student loans. And I've been doing that for a few years now, ever since fall of 2023, when the COVID-19 moratorium ended. Everyone was required to go back into repayment. And people literally didn't know what to do. So I fell into that space and really loved it. And so I'm excited to share my knowledge about some of the upcoming changes on the student loan front. In addition to student loan consulting, I'm also a certified financial planner, and I do financial planning outside of the student loan consulting. But it's a great way to mesh financial planning with student loan planning, because student loan conversations are often a great segue into financial planning conversations.
I had student loans way back in the dark ages, in the 1980s. And having those student loans really, and having to repay them after I got out of school, it set me back as much as I was a late starter in terms of some of the financial accomplishments that people at that time did in their 20s and early 30s. Like, for example, I didn't take my first mortgage until I was in my late 30s. But do you find that if people don't handle their student loans correctly, that it can really change their trajectory of their financial?
Absolutely. And often what I find when I'm working with a client initially, they believe that they can't accomplish anything else until they have
Mhm.
their student loans paid off. That is one of the biggest misconception about student loans. So often we find people just throwing all of their extra money towards paying down their student loans, which can actually be detrimental, particularly if you qualify for some of the federal provisions where you can pay solely based off your income. That frees up cash flow so you can save for a home, so you can save for retirement, so you can save for your wedding. So that's one of the things I try to encourage clients to look at is how can we achieve both things at the same time? That is possible if you have student loans.
I know people are worried right now about some of the changes that were included in the OBBBA. These changes went into effect this year. What should we know about those changes and what should we be on the lookout for?
Where do I start?
Yeah, where
Because
do you start? Because there's a
yeah,
lot. So some programs are
yeah.
going away, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this bill is quietly one of the biggest student loan rewrites in
Mhm.
decades. So if you borrow or if you advise borrowers or you have kids heading to college, the rules are going to change for you materially. And these are statutory changes, mind you. This has already been signed into law. This is not a proposal. This is law. And most of the major provisions are going to start this year, July 1st, with a few key provisions in
Mhm.
2027 and 2028. The biggest thing that folks need to be concerned about is the elimination of the Grad Plus loan. So I don't know if when you were in college at the time, if the Grad Plus loan was in place, but the purpose of the Grad Plus loan program was to help graduate students basically pay for their programs and their cost of living. While they did have access to the direct federal loan program, unsubsidized loans, oftentimes these programs were so costly that the loans did not cover the full tuition and or full cost of living. And so that the Grad Plus loan program was a way to cover that gap in the way that the direct federal loan program
Mhm.
did. Okay. And this was especially important for professional programs like medical schools, dental schools, law schools that tend to be very expensive. Unfortunately, under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the Grad Plus program is gone for new borrowers after July 1st, 2026. Now, legacy borrowers, so if you've already started your program and you already started taking out Grad Plus loans, you can continue to do that for up to 3 academic years or until you complete the program, whichever is less. But for those that are going to be starting their programs in the fall of this year, no more grad plus loans. This is going to disproportionately impact a lot of people. It's going to impact law students, med school students, dental students, other professional students, career changers who are returning to school later in life. The idea here, the reason why they created this law, I think, is that they're thinking that this is going to force schools to lower tuition. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is the gap is going to shift to private student loans, private lenders. And we know that the private student loans don't have the same protections or provisions as federal student loans do. So that's going to be a challenge in the way that people plan for college costs, and particularly grad schools and professional schools in the future.
Just so I understand, has graduate student lending been completely eliminated, or is there a cap on how much somebody can borrow?
Yeah. So the direct federal loan program is still in place. With the Grad Plus program going away, graduate students will still have access to the direct federal program unsubsidized loans. For graduate students, that maximum is $20,500 a year. And for professional students, it's $50,000 a year. So in the example for UCSD, where out-of-state tuition was, or in-state tuition was $46,000, the professional loans could cover that, but then they would still be on the hook for cost of living if they needed money for that. And then for out-of-state tuition, it's $58,000 a year. So at a $50,000 maximum, that's not going to cover the full tuition. It's likely those students will be forced to take out private student loans or figure out a way to fill that gap on their. And
That's just not enough for med school, for example.
also keep in mind with these programs, they're very intensive in that they don't allow the student to work. You can't hold a full-time job, let alone a part-time job when you're going to medical school. So that's often why they were taking out these grad plus loans to help support their cost of living. It's going to be gone come July 1st. And so that's really going to impact who applies and attends grad school or medical school, dental school. And for some folks who decide they're going to attend anyway, that likely means they're going to have to finance this with private student loan debt. Again, debt that doesn't have the same provisions or protections as federal loans.
That is often more expensive in terms of the interest rate.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This particular provision worries me a lot when I think about we have an aging population. We don't have enough people entering healthcare professions, for example. And if we don't have enough doctors and dentists and nurses and nurse practitioners and physicians assistants, this training that requires many years of school, I don't see how, what are we going to do as a country? We're not going to have enough healthcare providers.
Yeah, but we'll probably see medical expenses go up even further because of the lack of providers. And not just that, this is going to disproportionately impact clinicians of color. The medicine industry in particular already has a dearth of physicians of color. And I think this is going to exacerbate that because often they're first generation students and they depend on these student loans to finance medical school. And so again, without the Grad Plus loan program, I think we're going to see less people of color applying to these programs. That's one of the saddest things about these changes, in my opinion.
That is very sad. And of course, we may see some well-endowed private schools just make up the difference, but not every school is going to be able to make up the difference.
You're right.
What are some of the action steps that somebody can take if, say, their child is like a junior in college right now and they're looking to go on into a professional program? What should they be doing right now?
Planning. And that's exactly the kind of work I do at my firm, Student Loan Savvy. I do pre-debt consultations, meaning I love working with prospective students. Before you enter the program, let's take a look at what options do you have for funding? What are the costs of the program, first and foremost? If you're looking at several programs, what are the costs of those programs? What is the expected salary you're expected to make upon graduation? Okay. How much in student loans will you be able to take out, especially now with these new limits? Will you need private student loans to fill in the gap? And then what potentially will be your payments, your monthly payments look like coming out of school? And then what are the expected or estimated overall costs. So not just the monthly payment, which folks tend to center on, but what are going to be the total costs once you factor in interest and interest compounding over time? And is this program worth it based on all these factors? So I encourage folks to book a pre-debt planning consultation. So that's where I would start.
It sounds like that kind of pre-debt consultation might not just be helpful for somebody thinking about entering graduate school or professional program, but maybe
And
just the regular old student that's going to be taking student loans. My mother put papers in front of me and said, "Oh, sign this." I had no idea at 18 years old what I was signing. I really didn't understand the implications of the loans that I was taking.
me neither. When I took out student loans in college, I had the attitude, I'm going to take out these loans now and figure it out later. We're not
Mhm.
living in that world anymore. We can't just
Mhm.
figure it out later. We need to be doing planning now. So, yeah.
Okay, so we know that there's going to the graduate plus loans are being eliminated, which has, just to recap, has both societal implications in terms of maybe drastically limiting the pool of people who might be able to afford to go to these professional programs. But
Um,
also for those people who do go, they really have to plan for how they're going to finance that education, because that may force them to take more expensive private loans or to put off their decision and work for a while. So it sounds like students and parents really need to be thinking about this very far in advance.
Absolutely. And as it relates to parents, so there's another provision that's changing under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and that's the Parent Plus loans. So one of the biggest misconception I find about student loans is this is a millennial issue. This is Gen Z's problem. But
Oh,
older
not at
people,
all.
older people have student loans, Parent Plus loans. So these are parents who have taken out loans on behalf of their children. So the loans are in the parent's name, but they're using it to fund their kids' college education. Ultimately, the parents are on the hook for paying them back. There are some important changes that are coming to that program as well, some new limits. So for dependent students, it's going to be $20,000 a year max with a $65,000 lifetime maximum. This starts July 1st of this year. So if you already started taking out Parent Plus loans, you're not exposed to that limit, but this is for new Parent Plus
Mhm.
loans, new Parent Plus loan borrowers. And why this matters is because parents previously functioned as the lender of last resort. And with these new caps, it can force early student borrowing now, more private loans, and possibly even changes in school selection. There might be some parents who decide, along with their kids, that they can't attend certain
Mhm.
schools because of these caps, to make the schools now unaffordable. Yeah.
But I have to say, as a financial planner who's seen many parents who are in their 50s or early 60s paying off the student loans for their children, and sometimes multiple children, to go through school that maybe they couldn't have really afforded in the first place. I'm of two minds about that. On the one hand, I think it's good that there's a cap on parents' less loans. On the other hand, parents, if they don't have savings for college, I mean, that's how you get through college. Is you have to borrow to invest in yourself and your own education.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. Yeah.
As part of that debt planning, what should parents of students who are going off to college think now in terms of Parent Plus? What are the options to this?
So very similar
Mm.
to graduate students, looking at the cost of these programs. What is the potential salary that the parent and the student expects to make from
Mhm.
this? Another thing that I have conversations as it relates to Parent Plus loans is coming up with a game plan with the child for the child to pay the parent back. Even though the
Yes.
parent is
Mhm.
on the hook, you could have backdoor deal with your
Mhm.
child, explaining to them or coming up with the plan where they're going to pay a portion of these loans when they graduate. And they could have a literal contract signed with their child agreeing to help them pay these student loans so that the burden does not fully fall on these parents. Because often the conversations I'm having with them is they're trying to balance retirement savings with paying these student loans. But if they're exposed to $1,000, $2,000, sometimes $3,000 a month payments, that puts a hamper on anybody's ability to save for retirement. This is going to require for parents to have some difficult conversations with their children about what they can truly afford, especially with these limits, and how that child is going to help the parents pay these loans back upon graduation.
University is so expensive now, as we know. And there's only one way to pay for retirement, and there's multiple ways to pay for an education. You can get a less expensive education and go in-state, for example, or go 2 years at community college and then transfer to a different institution. That might not be your student's first choice. They may have an expensive private school in mind that's out of state, but you shouldn't jeopardize your own retirement by borrowing more than you could really afford.
And you know what? It might also mean that maybe the child needs to take a part-time job while in school. Know that some students like to be able to just focus on school full-time. But with these new limits, that might have to change. There might be some students that need to be willing to work, maybe even full-time while they're in school. I don't think that's optimal personally, but I think some students are going to be forced to do that.
My husband has 4 brothers and sisters, and he was born overseas, but he grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. And his parents told all the siblings, they said, we will pay for you to go to school in Wisconsin. If you want to go somewhere else, you're on the hook for the difference. He worked before he went away to school. He went to UCSD, actually, and then finished at Cal, and because he needed to make money to pay the difference. Of course, school is less expensive than it is for somebody now.
Yeah.
Not even accounting for inflation. So now the thing I've been talking to clients about is the repayment programs that are going away. And this is an important deadline for people to know about and to go and check your student loan statement, because you may not know that your repayment program is going away and they're getting shuffled into a different one.
Exactly. So one of the things the one big beautiful bill did is they're trying to simplify things, which I do understand, because and Biden was trying to do this too, mind you. It's just there's too many payment plans out there causing confusion, acronyms, different eligibility requirements. That's why I have a job. It was just causing a lot of confusion for folks. So what the bill does is dramatically reduce the amount of income-driven payment plans that are available. Starting July 1st, for new borrowers, you're only going to have 2 options. You're going to have the standard plan, which that's a plan that aims to pay the loans off in full, either over 10, 20, 25, 30 years. And then a new income-driven payment plan called RAP, which is an acronym for repayment assistance plan. So some of the other IDR plans folks might be, or income-driven repayment plans folks might be familiar with, like the SAVE plan, which is the newest one under Biden.
Which is the one that's been a lot of litigation around that, if I remember.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that plan is gone. That plan is not coming back. But yeah, SAVE, pay as you earn or pay, income contingent repayment, ICR, those are gone come July 1st. Well, the graduated and extended plans. So there were certain types of standard plans where you would start off with a really low monthly payment. Every 2 years, it would increase by an inflationary amount. That's going away as well.
Oh, and the graduated payment is going away? That I didn't know that. Oh.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So again, the purpose of this was to make things more simple. The problem with this, though, is when the Biden administration was considering reducing plans, what they were going to do is, if you were a borrower already enrolled in the plan, you were going to be grandfathered in it. With this bill, there is no grandfathering. For example, I am on pay as you earn, but that plan is going to be taken away come 2028. I need to be off the plan before 2028. And why that's problematic is this is a 20-year plan. I was already halfway through. Now I'm going to have to move, like other borrowers, I'm going to have to move to something called IBR, income-based repayment, which is a 25-year plan. So now I can expect to make my student loan payments for another 5 years than I expected to pay. That's the situation a lot of folks are going to find themselves falling into.
So if somebody's in one of these plans that's not the IBR plan, the income-based repayment plan. So if they've got any other acronym, basically they should be looking at moving into the IBR.
Correct. Now, what
Under
I'm
most circumstances, it depends on what their income is.
exactly. So you'll
Yeah.
want to evaluate that. So for some folks, right now, it's cheaper to stay on pay. And I'm one of those folks. My payment is $100 a month. I'm going to ride that out for as long as I can, with the understanding, though, I need to get off that plan before 2028. If I don't, what the administration is going to do is they're going to force you onto the WRAP plan. And the problem with that is that's terminal. The law says that once you're enrolled into the WRAP plan, you can't get out of it.
Wow. So
And
you
so now
can't do
that
like
you're
a
paying for
forbearance or anything like that?
you can do forbearances,
Yeah.
but you have to make payments on that plan. And the WRAP plan, which we'll get into later, is a 30-year plan. So now I went from 20 years of repayment to now 30 years
30
because I
years,
didn't
yeah.
act in time. So that's a very important deadline that people with student loans need to be aware of.
So with the graduated income plan, just so I understand correctly, if you're on the graduated income plan now, does that go away, or do you have to move to the IBR, or is it just for new borrowers won't have access to that plan?
So it's just for new borrowers who won't
Mhm.
have access. The only two plans they'll have access to is the standard plan and WRAP. But some of these other income-driven payment plans, graduated is not an income-driven payment plan. It's just a payment that is rising every 2 years. But the income-driven payment plans like Save, Pay, ICR, those are going away by 2028.
The requirements generally be the same, like with the income-driven payment. If you end up with a much higher income, for example, in a subsequent year, then your payments go up.
Exactly. Definitely tied to your salary every year. If your income's going up exponentially, your payment's going up with it.
Okay. Huh.
Or vice
what are
versa.
some-
If your income's going down,
Yeah.
payment will.
Your payments will go down. So let's say you've got a mix of undergraduate and graduate loans. What should you be doing to check right now?
So right now, if you're already in the federal direct system, you should be looking at what payment plan are you on currently. If you're
Where
on,
can
for
people
example,
find that?
by logging into your Department of Education account, which is studentaid.gov, that should show you what payment you're on, or you could log into your student loan servicer account. So understanding
Yeah,
who
that's
your
too.
servicer is, that's quite incredibly important.
Yeah.
And they'll show you in your account what payment plan you're on. But what's imperative is understanding what payment plan are you on. And for some folks, they're on the Save forbearance right now because of the litigation that's happening. So their interest is accruing, but they legally cannot make payments, not on the Save plan anyway. So for those borrowers, they need to be deciding, we know the Save car is driving itself off a cliff. We need to get out of this moving vehicle. And when are we going to do it? Are we ready to do it? Is our monthly cash flow ready for a payment? Or how do we get it ready for a payment? Folks who are not on the Save forbearance, maybe you're like me, you're on pay as you earn and you have an incredibly low payment. You can continue to ride that out, but mark on your calendar, and I would say maybe 6 months before 2028, I need to get off this plan and figure out, do I get on the IBR plan or do I get on the WRAP plan?
Yeah. What is the deadline getting on that IBR plan?
The IBR plan is part of the IBR statute from 2007. That was not one of the plans that was on the chopping block. You can get on IBR now. There's no deadline for that, but there is the deadline to get off pay. Like if you're on pay, Save, or ICR, there is a deadline to get off that before 2028 and either get on IBR, which is part of the statute, or get on WRAP, which is part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Up. I know it's so confusing. This is why my job exists.
I went to some continuing ed about this at a recent conference, and I'm still like trying to get my head around everything. My understanding, if you're on the IBR plan, you can't borrow more, right? Isn't that correct? You couldn't go back to school and borrow more and stay on the IBR plan. Is that correct?
So again,
Yeah.
new borrower. So then you
Yeah.
become a new borrower. So if you go back to school July 1st, then you remove the ability to get on the IBR plan. And
Mhm.
then at that point, you would only be eligible again for the RAP plan. We'll talk about more of those specifics in a
Yeah.
minute or so. Or the new
Okay.
standard plan, which you're looking at paying those loans off under that plan.
Okay. So then how about the person then that they're on track for loan forgiveness? So I guess maybe public service loan forgiveness or just the plain vanilla loan forgiveness. How does this impact those folks?
Yeah, so PSLF is not on the chopping block. And that's one of the most common questions I get from
Mhm.
clients is fear that PSLF is going away. PSLF was a law that was created by
Mhm.
Congress in 2007. PSLF can't go away just because an administration wills it. They
Mhm.
would need 60 votes in the Senate to get rid of it, and Congress has not expressed any desire to target PSLF. We do have an administration that's trying to circumvent Congress by instituting executive actions around what is defined as qualified employers. So they're trying to
Right.
eliminate.
Who's a public servant. Yeah.
Exactly. They're trying to
Yeah.
eliminate certain employers who are working against the administration's agenda. As it stands now, according to the Department of Education website, nothing about PSLF has changed. So don't let the headline news scare you.
Okay.
Student loans very political. That's one of the things I've learned working in this space. It's just a highly political topic, especially student loan forgiveness. But in terms of PSLF, like the RAP plan, which we'll get into, you can use that's an income driven payment plan you can use to help achieve PSLF because part of the
Mhm.
requirement is you need to be on an income driven payment plan. So you can use the
Okay.
RAP plan to achieve that. You can use the IBR plan to achieve that. Temporarily, you can use the pay plan or the
Mhm.
ICR plan to do that, but know that you have to get off those two plans before
Mhm.
2028 and switch to either IBR or RAP.
Has anything changed about what happens tax wise when student loans are forgiven?
Yeah, great question. So back in 2021, the Biden administration, under the American Rescue Act, they signed a provision that temporarily made non-PSLF student loan forgiveness tax-free. Now, mind you,
Mhm.
PSLF is part of the law. The forgiveness is tax-free, okay? But for normal income-driven repayment forgiveness, where you're paying for 20, 25, 30 years, originally, the law was written that it was supposed to be taxable because the IRS says that really any debt that's
The
forgiven, whether it's
forgiveness is
student loans,
taxable.
credit
Yeah.
card debt, is considered taxable income. So Biden signed this law that made student loan forgiveness temporarily tax exempt until 2026. We're in 2026 now. Unfortunately, that has expired. So we'll go back to the old rules where if you have your loans forgiven now, non PSLF forgiveness, you're
Mhm.
going to be exposed to what I call a tax bomb. So
Mhm.
folks are going to need to start saving for the tax bomb of student loan forgiveness.
Mhm. So there's the net forgiveness, if you will, is whatever the balance is
Mhm.
minus the taxes on that balance.
Exactly. And it's very
Mhm.
concerning to me, Cynthia, because it almost defeats the purpose of student loan forgiveness because I'm finding that folks have hundreds of thousands of student loans, and that forgiveness is creating six-figure tax debt. So you went from having a $300,000 loan balance to now a $100,000 tax debt that was
Which
going
is
to be due April 15th after that tax year. Most people are not going to have the money to pay their tax bill. So now this turns into another debt. They're going to have an installment plan with the IRS. They're likely going to charge interest on that. It just turns into another loan. That's crazy.
it is crazy. And I don't think, but all my years as a financial planner, I don't think a lot of people who are headed towards forgiveness really, unless they're working with a student loan advisor or student loan counselor, I don't think they know that this is something they can potentially tax.
Yeah. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right, which is why it's so important to connect with a consultant like
Mhm.
me and come up with a game plan. And this is often one of the conversations I have with
Mhm.
borrowers who are on the track of forgiveness is how do we plan for the future
Mhm.
potential tax bomb? So I have a calculator that helps determine all of that, and we help them determine a monthly amount that they can square away into a brokerage account, which is often what I recommend. Have that money growing, putting it into the stock market, fully diversified, low cost ETFs or mutual funds to help them cover the future tax bill.
And so for the public servant, this is the same for that tax-free benefit of the forgiveness is going away for everybody, right? Okay.
Yeah, I want to make sure that's clear.
Okay.
As part of the PSLF law, okay, this is law that student loan forgiveness under the PSLF program will always be tax-free unless Congress decides to change it, which they have not said they're going to do. So if you're a public servant pursuing PSLF, your forgiveness is going to be tax-free. It's the non-PSLF.
So you're a teacher, a firefighter, a police officer, a doctor,
Exactly. A
public
nonprofit
clinic,
physician.
yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So it's the folks who are working in corporate America, for example. They're on the pay plan like me, paying for 20 years, or they're going to switch to the RAP plan at some point. If after that 30 years, there is a balance to be forgiven, you will pay taxes on that. So
You'll pay taxes on that. Okay. That's a great explanation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I like your idea of if you're heading towards that time where you're going to be owing taxes on the amount forgiven is to get ahead of that by trying to invest for that tax bill.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you tell us a little bit more about
Yeah. So the RAP
what's different
plan
about it? Yeah.
is the newest income-driven payment plan under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, where payments are anywhere between 1 to 10% of your AGI, which I find very interesting. So with other income-driven payment plans, your payments were a percentage of something called discretionary income, which was your AGI minus a federal family poverty line deduction based on your household size. So at the time, the federal government was giving you a little bit of buffer, saying you can make this amount of money and have a $0 payment. But then anything above that, you're going to pay a percentage of your income. That's going away with this RAP plan. It is not 1 to 10% of your discretionary income. It's 1 to 10% of your AGI. So they're going to look at line 11 on your tax return, see how much you made the prior year, and determine your payment based on that 1 to 10%. And it works in a tiered manner. So you make $10,000 AGI, you're going to pay 1%. $20,000 up to $20,000, 2%, up to $30,000, 3%, and so on. And then it caps out at 10% with a minimum pay.
So that means if I've got this correctly, so if you make $100,000 a year, you're going to pay $10,000 a year in student loan repayments divided by 12.
Exactly.
Wow. Is that more than a traditional 10-year payment plan or less?
It might be. Also why you need to run those numbers, because for some folks, the RAP plan is going to be, the payment on the RAP plan is going to be very high. And I'm thinking about particularly high income earners like attorneys and physicians. It could be higher. So you'll want to run those numbers and compare. But that's how the RAP plan calculates your payment. Another thing is there's no more $0 monthly payments. I've had some clients on these other IDR plans where their income was so low that their payment was literally $0 a month, partly because it was the discretionary income definition. They had that poverty line deduction working as a buffer, which yielded a $0 a month payment. If they were pursuing PSLF, they were basically getting $0 a month payments for the next 10 years until they finished PSLF, and they were golden. I think this administration realized some people were getting that kind of deal. So this plan is eliminating $0 a month payments on the RAP plan. The minimum, even if your income is really low, you will pay at least $10 a month. They want you paying at least something towards these loans.
Have a little skin in the game. Yeah.
Exactly. Another key provision with the RAP plan is a $50 a month principal credit per dependent. So under RAP, any interest that accrues that isn't covered by your monthly payment, it gets waived. Okay. And then on top of that, the plan can credit up to $50 per dependent towards the principal every month. And the goal of that to prevent negative amortization, prevent the loan balance from growing astronomically due to accrued interest. So that I personally think is a wonderful thing. What I don't like about it, though, it's a 30-year term. So for folks
Which
like
is as
me,
long as a
there
mortgage.
is very much, yes. And there's
Mhm.
no payment cap. So for high income borrowers like physicians, the more money you make, the more money you will pay on this plan. And there's no limit to how high that payment can go. So that might impact your forgiveness, right? Because if you're making really high payments for 30 years, it's very likely you'll pay off those loans before that 30-year period ends. There's no forgiveness, which actually
Yeah.
could be a good thing. That could actually be a good
Mhm.
strategy, particularly for borrowers who know their income is high enough that they're going to pay off the loans anyway. They can go on the RAP plan and take advantage of that interest subsidy as opposed to going on the standard plan where the
Mhm.
interest continues to accrue.
Is the standard plan, is it still designed to have the loans paid off in 10 years?
Yes. Yes.
Now, if you're on the RAP plan, can you switch to the standard?
Yes.
You can.
Yes.
Okay.
But I would
So,
probably
mhm.
discourage that, just given the strategy that I've been thinking through over the past
Mhm.
month. I think it could be financially beneficial, like even if you know you're going to pay off these loans, to go on
Mhm.
the RAP plan anyway. As long as the payment is not bigger than it would be on the standard plan,
The
you can
standard
take
plan.
advantage
Okay.
of that interest subsidy.
Huh. That's really interesting. Just to make up a scenario here. So let's say you have an unexpected like equity event at your job
Yeah.
and you work for a company before it went public and all of a sudden and you've made like an extra $300,000. Does that mean you
Yeah.
have to pay an extra $30,000 in student loans that next year?
Likely. Yeah, very likely. Or so that's actually a really great question. So you know that
Mm,
there's two ways to certify your income on an
mm.
income-driven payment plan. You can
Tell
provide
us
the
about
prior
that.
year.
Yeah.
You can, and this is a great planning opportunity. You can
Oh,
provide the prior year's tax return, or you can provide current documentation like a pay stub. So if you know you had some type of
oh,
liquidity event that, made your income higher than it usually is, I would just encourage that client to provide a pay stub showing what their current income
okay.
is. So that
Mm,
payment is calculated based off current income, not last year's shares for
mm,
$300,000 of income. So
mm.
that's another thing that I talk to clients about regularly is what documentation should be used when they're recertifying their income.
Can we dig into the people that are stuck in the SAVE program right now?
Yeah.
That it's still a limited pool of people, but those people are in limbo. What should they be doing right now? And can they even do anything?
Yeah. They can definitely do something. They can get out of the plan. And right now they can enroll in the pay plan. They can enroll in ICR. They can't enroll in the RAP plan yet because that's not going to be available until
Mhm,
July, but they can also enroll in IBR. So
mhm,
figuring out what does your budget or your cash flow look like right now? Can you afford to make a payment? If you can't, there's nothing wrong with staying in the safe forbearance. Just understand the implications of that. Interest
mhm,
began accruing August 1st. So your balance is getting bigger while you're waiting. But again, if there's a cash flow squeeze, there's nothing wrong with that. But
no,
really, while you're waiting, this is a good time to be figuring out how do we make room in our cash flow for our payment because inevitably people are going to be kicked off the safe forbearance at some point this year and you're going to need to be ready for a payment.
mhm,
There's just no way around it. So that's also one of the conversations I'm having with clients right now is how do I make room for this payment that I really
mhm.
can't afford right now?
At Real Life Planning, we work with real estate investors, and many real estate investors, they might have a fantastic cash flow, but their taxable income is more modest because depreciation shelters a lot of their rental income, especially where they're in the scaling phase, where they're acquiring new properties, and maybe one spouse is a real estate agent and they claim real estate professional status. I see folks fairly often who still have large student loan balances. They're on an income-based repayment plan of some kind, and they haven't been paying off their student loans anything in particular you would say to those folks that might be different than what you've already said?
So lower income folks,
So high
like
cash
lower,
flow, taxable income. Yeah.
I think that puts you in a really prime position to be on an income driven payment plan and paying the bare minimum just strictly based off your income so you can continue on the path to forgiveness. That's another thing is understanding, do I qualify for forgiveness or not? Am I on the path to forgiveness or not?
Oh, people are so
Evaluating that.
confused by that.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you understand what path you're on, stay on that path. So that's another one of the big mistakes I see people make. They're on an income driven payment plan, but they're paying more than the bare minimum. Like you're literally giving money away to the federal government when you're doing that because you're paying down your future forgiveness when you think about it. There is no incentive when you're lower income and can get on an income driven payment plan to pay more than the bare minimum. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, that makes sense. Is there anything else about student loans that are changing that people should know about?
Yeah, there are nuances to rules around deferments, forbearances. So, no more economic hardship or unemployment deferments for newer loans after July 1st, which is sad. So, right now, as the rule stands, if you're unemployed, you can put the loans in a hardship forbearance and not be required to make payments, and you're not going to have interest accruing. That goes away for new borrowers come July 1st. So, folks need to be prepared for that. Also
Is
forbearance.
the
Yeah,
possibility of defaults?
that does increase the
Yeah.
possibility. And yeah, the New York Times actually just came up with an article about a week ago estimating there's going to be a record number of student loan defaults because of this bill. So yeah, very sad, very sad. And then forbearance. So right now, you can put your loans in a forbearance, meaning you can have payments paused, but interest will continue to accrue, and you can do it for up to 12 months at a time. And so the new bill is going to decrease that to 9 months in any 24-month period for loans after July 1st, 2027.
So
So
in a future recession, if we have a recession like we did during the Great Recession, for example, where some people were out of work for more than a year, then we're gonna see more defaults.
exactly. Yeah.
And now during COVID, it seemed to me that there was like when people started to get back on these repayment plans, it seemed like there was a way for people who were in default to get back into compliance. Has any about that changed?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways that you can do that. If your loans are in default, you can consolidate your loans. And what that does is essentially create a new loan that is no longer in default. You want to be careful about that though, because when you consolidate your loans, you lose the payment history that you had with those loans, including any PSLF count. So let's say that you have 100 PSLF credits, you need 120 credits to get to forgiveness, and you consolidate those loans, those credits are gone. And you bring up a really good point. We need to be careful about consolidation as well, because consolidating post July 1st of this year means that you lose access to IBR, and now you only have access to either the standard plan or the WRAP plan because you created a new loan. So weighing the pros and cons in that with the professional is going to be imperative. This is where I anticipate big mistakes happening if people aren't careful.
Yeah, it's so important for somebody that's maybe not in compliance or maybe out of compliance with out of payment for all their loans or some of their loans to see a student loan counselor if they can before they make these decisions. I was talking with a client not too long ago who was new and as part of the onboarding process, we were reviewing their student loans and they had refinanced all of their federal student loans with a private lender. And now their interest rate was great. And then that person lost their job for a little while. And so that they lost the ability to make any changes to their loan repayment structure.
That's terrible. I am so sorry to hear that. That's another one of the conversations I have. Very rarely, honestly, do I recommend private refinancing. Even if the goal is to pay off the loans, my rule of thumb is if you can get an interest rate at least 1% lower than what you're paying now, it could be worth it. But you want to understand what you're giving up to get
Right.
that lower
A lot of
interest rate.
protections. Yeah.
Exactly. Forbearances, death and disability provisions. So with federal student loans, if I die tomorrow, my loans are going to be forgiven.
But yeah.
No, exactly. God
Yeah.
forbid. Just using that as an example, my loans will be wiped
Yeah.
clean. With private
Right.
student
Your
loans,
family isn't going to have to pay them off. Right?
exactly. Or if
Yeah.
I'm totally or permanently disabled, though this is hard to get, the provision still exists that my loans can be forgiven if I can prove that I can no longer
Mm.
work. That's not the
Mhm.
case with private student loans. And so sometimes
Mm.
I tell people the higher interest rate on a federal loan serves as an insurance policy. It can
Mm.
make sense to pay more if you value these protections. But if
Mhm.
you want to, if you feel like you have to private refinance, then make sure you have a strong term life insurance policy and disability insurance
Mm.
policy in place to protect you in case you can't make the payments for whatever
Mm.
reason.
Is there anything else that we should know about student loans?
The only other thing is one thing that I do like about these student loan changes is incorporate some institutional accountability. So what it's going to do is it's going to hold institutions to their promises. Often these universities make promises about what kind of salary the student can
Mm.
graduate with, but oftentimes students are finding that they're not making the salary they thought
Mm.
they were going to be making. So what the One Big Beautiful Bill does is it looks at the median earnings of the students that have graduated from the university
Mm.
4 years after the program. And if the salary does not align with the standards under the OBBA, the federal government has the right to take away funding from the universities. Actually, I like that idea, just holding more of these institutions accountable, and especially these private for-profit institutions that are
Mhm.
notoriously known for promising big salaries and not coming through on that. So that's something
Coming
I'm
through.
very
And then,
excited about it.
yeah, I agree with that. And then some of these degree mills, if you will, some of which are in litigation, trying to get people refunds, they just encourage people to sign up for the loans to fund degrees that they can't use. Yeah.
Exactly.
What happens to some of that litigation now that there were? Some students have been awarded or their loans have been forgiven because that educational institution was deemed to be like not accredited. But there's still some that are in litigation right now. Is there anything that we should know about that?
Absolutely. So I have seen some borrower, and the program you're referring to is called Borrower's Defense. And I have seen some borrowers get their loans forgiven. But there are a lot more. There are literally hundreds of thousands of borrower defense applications that have not been processed. From what I know is that the current administration requested an 18-month delay in processing those applications, and they recently denied that request. So at some point, this administration is going to have to get the ball rolling with these
Mhm.
applications again. They're dragging their
Mhm.
feet. I don't know for how long they're going to continue to
Mhm.
drag their feet, but I keep my fingers crossed
Yeah.
for these
Mhm.
borrowers.
Hasn't the definition of what's a profession been severely
Yeah.
narrowed? I was like gobsmacked to find out that being a nurse was no longer considered a profession.
Yeah. Nurse, school psychologist,
Yeah.
therapist. They're no longer, and why that status is important is because it allows these students to be eligible to take out the
Mhm.
$50,000 a year. Now they'll still be able to take out loans, but now they'll be limited to the 20,500. So if the cost of those programs are not covered by these maximums, again, that means they're going to have to turn to private student loans or hold down jobs while they're in grad school or figure out some way to fill that gap.
So, Kathleen, so many important things for student loan borrowers who are current student loan borrowers to think about and to take care of, action steps to take. So many important steps for parents to take for their students who are in college or going to grad school. Where can people find you to talk about some of these things?
Yeah. So you can come to my website. It's studentloansavvy.com. And I have some blog posts for educational resources. But if you feel like you need expert support, I do offer one-on-one consultations. I'll ask you for your loan data, and then I'll sit down with you. And I take my calls virtually via Zoom and sit down with you for an hour, get to know you, your situation, your loan situation, and help you put together a game plan for either paying off the student loans or reaching forgiveness. So, again, that's studentloansavvy.com. You can also email me at Kathleen@studentloansavvy.com. If you have more questions about the way that I work with clients, feel free to email me there and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Kathleen, this has been a really informative conversation. I can't thank you enough for having it with me. Maybe we can have another one sometime in the near future about changes in financial aid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.